Hi, and welcome to the Thrive Alcohol-Free podcast. I'm Dupe Witherick, alcohol-free wellbeing and transformational coach, and the best-selling author of A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol-Free. This podcast will show you that being alcohol-free is not what the traditional narrative says. And even though alcohol is so ingrained in our society that it is okay to give yourself permission to stop drinking if you want to. And you do not have to wait until you hit rock bottom. It is certainly not boring, and I believe ditching drinking is just the start to living an extraordinary life. By getting rid of this one thing, it allows the doors to open to endless possibilities and opportunities. Each week, we will have guests on who are at various stages of the alcohol-free journey, from those who are curious to those who have been alcohol-free for years. We will also have experts on talking about different topics relating to alcohol and beyond. Through these conversations, you will discover what it means to thrive alcohol-free. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Thrive Alcohol-Free podcast. I'm so pleased you are here, and I have a very exciting guest on, which I will get to in a bit. I hope you've had the most wonderful week, and I am currently in Marrakesh, and we're having a fabulous time exploring Marrakesh and working at the same time, and it's been lots of fun. And I posted about our senses and how potentially if I'd been in Marrakesh 5, 6 years ago, I probably wouldn't have appreciated just all the colours and the senses and the smells and just the vibrancy of the city. And I certainly wouldn't have appreciated not being able to find somewhere to get a drink. It can be a bit tricky to get anything alcoholic, but they do the most marvelous mocktails. So I'm really enjoying that. But just really taking in the spices and the food and just the environment, all the colour and the rugs and the plates, and walking through the Medina and the markets and just seeing the different stalls. It's just been fabulous. But alcohol absolutely shuts down a lot of our senses. If you think about it, when you've had a drink, you might have walked into a really noisy bar, but after a while you don't really notice it. Or you've had a drink and you tend to sort of wobble a little bit around, and you might bump into someone, but again, you don't really think about it. Your sense of touch just isn't there. When you think about how your smell as well, you might have smelt something pretty rotten, but actually after a while that just wouldn't even occur to you. If you nipped to the loo or something and there was like an awful smell, you wouldn't really notice it. Then we talk about blurry vision and not really being able to see straight or hold that conversation. So our senses are really impacted by drinking, and that can just be after a couple of drinks. And so I was really mindful actually that just being able to enjoy Marrakesh and everything it offers, it would have been very different potentially before. And I would have probably thought, you go to the Medina and you wander around and it'd be like, right, where's a bar that I can get a drink at? And that would have been my focus versus actually, let's explore this beautiful place. Let's look at the mosque, let's look at the gardens, etc. So I'm very appreciative. And if you are thinking that potentially you would like to take a break from alcohol and have that time where you reset everything and you start to feel the joy as well, because I think a lot of the time we use alcohol to numb pain and numb negative things, help us with stress, help us relax. But really what we're also doing is we're numbing those positive things, we're numbing the joy. It just dulls us. And so if you're thinking that you want to take a break from alcohol and you'd like to start now, if you're ready for it, I'm currently doing my 21-day challenge group coaching program. Our first group coaching session starts today, but it will be recorded, so you can always catch up. But if you would like to join, there is still time, so I'll put the details below. It's a 3-week coaching program where we're really going to reset. If you know my story, I stopped drinking for 21 days and everything changed, and I've continued for what is now over 4 years. And so I would love you to look into it. You'll get support. You'll get guided through various tools and techniques. We'll do weekly coaching, hot seat coaching, Q&As. I'll also be talking through various topics as well to help you on this path. And there's also a Telegram group, so we have community there, and you can talk to like-minded people who are also going on this journey. And then there's some other goodies as well, which are shared along the way. And then you have the daily emails as well. So I'd love you to join. There's still time, and it's a very cost-effective investment at the moment. So feel free to check that out. And then the other thing that I'm really excited about, because we're 4 months away. I can't believe it's only 4 months away until the Finding Freedom retreat that's happening in Bali. And I would love you to join that. It's going to be an absolutely life-changing experience for you, because just by saying yes to yourself, you are stepping out of your comfort zone and going on this self-discovery journey. You're going to learn the power that's inside you and what you're truly capable of through the coaching, yoga, breathwork, sound baths, and healing ceremonies. You're really going to be able to let go of all those things that have been holding you back that you may not even have known. And if alcohol is a pattern as well, you'll be able to release those patterns and let them go. And so the retreat will help you learn tools such as EFT, meditation, visualization to help you in your daily life. And you'll also learn about things like human design, how to embrace your emotions, how to define your core values, set goals, and step into the future that you've always known was available to you, but may not have thought was possible. I fundamentally believe you'll go on this amazing journey in Bali where your perspective will be changed and you will learn and grow and make lifelong bonds with incredible like-minded women along the way. So if you are interested in joining me in Bali, then feel free to look at the details below. I'll put the link below, and you can book a call if you have any questions, or you can secure your spot with a deposit and you'll be on it with me. And I look forward to meeting you in Bali. Okay, so today's guest, who I'm really excited about, I met him in December at an event, and I was delighted when he said he would come on to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Don Wood, PhD, author, speaker, founder, and CEO of the Inspired Performance Institute and creator of the patented TIPP method, which focuses on helping people resolve their trauma and get their lives to a place of high performance. He's helped thousands of people live better lives and overcome the effects of stress, anxiety, depression, trauma, and addiction with his neuroscience-backed program, TIPP. The TIPP program is designed to clear away the effects of disturbing or traumatic events, repurpose old thinking patterns, and set the individual's mind up for peak performance. Dr. Don Wood is also author of 2 books, Emotional Concussions and You Must Be Out of Your Mind, and is releasing his newest book, Don't Mess With My DNA, in the near future. So I'm delighted Dr. Don is on the podcast. So without further ado, here is the episode with Dr. Don Wood. Enjoy. So welcome, Dr. Don. I am so pleased you are on the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. So for those who may not know you, it would be wonderful if you could just give us a brief introduction and we can go from there.
Very good. Yeah, I started the Inspired Performance Institute after realizing that my daughter had experienced trauma. And so she had 2 autoimmune disorders. And so there was no real answers for her. Everything was about managing, living, and coping with it. And once I started doing the research, we didn't know about her trauma at that point, and then we connected up the trauma to what she was dealing with. So what I do is I developed a program that we can eliminate the effects of anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, panic attacks using a cutting-edge neuroscience approach. Everybody just needs a reboot, and that's what we do. We reboot the brain.
Yeah, and I absolutely love your work. I was lucky enough to hear a talk with you in December last year, and I was just blown away by the work you do. And it's so similar in terms of reprogramming the subconscious mind and helping people realize that it is a reboot. There's a glitch, isn't there, you talk about. And so maybe we can go into this a bit more. So, for someone who's potentially developed the habit of drinking alcohol and sees this as potentially, they'll be Googling, am I an alcoholic? Am I drinking too much, etc. What's your take on that then in terms of breaking that habit and knowing that there's a different way? Because I think a lot of people automatically go to, if I'm not drinking that much, or I haven't got a problem, or I haven't hit this path. But it is a habit that they do 3 or 4 times a week, or potentially every day. And so, how would your work help with that?
Well, I take an interesting approach to it. And again, not everybody's addicted, but if you are addicted, well, I call it just basically a code. What you're calling are habits, right? Are really just codes because your brain's a computer. And what happens is if you repeat something over and over, consciously repeat it, then what
Mm,
happens is your subconscious takes it over. Because what
mm,
it says is if you've repeated this must be important to us. So instead of making it a thinking process now, it makes it an autonomic process. So it
mm,
gets turned over to the part of the brain that focuses on keeping you alive. And what you've inadvertently done is trained your brain to believe the alcohol is important. And so it'll keep bringing it to you because your subconscious doesn't know the difference between real or imagined, good, bad, right, or wrong. It's literal. So if every
mm,
time I take a drink of that alcohol, I feel better, that's
mm,
what the mind connects. So if
mm,
I have stress or I have trauma or something in my life and I take a drink, it temporarily stops the pain. And so
mm,
that's why you're doing it. And your subconscious mind operates in the present. So everything for your subconscious is now. So when
mm,
does it want the pain to stop? Now, right?
mm,
And Steve's, here's what's really interesting to pay is the subconscious mind has no connection to time. So it
mm,
can't see consequences, right, to doing something, whether it's good or bad. It's literal. So if I pick up this drink and I take a drink from it and it stops my pain, right? When did it stop it? Now.
mm,
Problem solved. It's only the conscious mind that can say, I shouldn't be doing this. This isn't good. I need to stop. But if the
mm,
survival brain has coded that, the logical, reasonable part of your mind cannot override the survival part of your brain. That's why the only way to do it is to then change. First, ideally, what we want to do is figure out, is there a cause to it? Because addiction is a symptom. So is there trauma that's created it? And chances are, in most cases, is probably a trauma-based situation. So your mind has figured out a way to stop that pain. So we need to get to that first.
mm,
Once we reset the trauma, then you can then start to break the codes or habits because the trauma is not pulling it back into survival mode. Does that
mm.
make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the root cause ultimately, then addressing the trauma itself. And when we talk about trauma, I think it's always interesting because I think a lot of people tend to think it's the big T traumas, but actually it can very much be the little T traumas that are causing this. And you might not even think you've had a trauma. So maybe you could give some examples of some of the people you've worked with in terms of the types of little T traumas that may be impacting someone as well.
Yeah, great question. I wrote my second book. I called it Emotional Concussions. So instead of little T's, there are emotional concussions.
Love that. Yeah.
That could be the overly critical parent. Maybe without bad intentions, the parent's trying to drive you to be better, but the children don't have enough life experience to interpret language. So a parent may
Mm,
be saying one thing, but the child's interpreting it completely different. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable, right? They don't care. And so
mm,
that may not be what the intention was, but that's how a child interprets it. So
mm,
that can then show up in a number of different behaviors or habits that your mind uses to protect you. And so the one thing that I always say, which people find interesting, I say it's impossible to sabotage yourself. And I hear that all the time. People will say, well,
mm,
I'm drinking, I'm just sabotaging myself. I go, well, no, you're not.
Mm,
It's not possible for the brain to sabotage itself. It's survival based. It's always
mm,
trying to focus on what's best for you. Now, that may look like sabotage, but your mind is trying to help you and trying to protect you from pain. And so, the other thing I use too as an example when people say, well, you're just trying to, you drink because you just want to be happy or you want to have a dopamine hit. And what I say is, well, think about it this way. If you and I were standing beside each other and I started to shake your hand, right? And I
mm,
started to squeeze so hard that you were in so much pain. And I said, all you need to do is take a drink of this and I'll let go. So you take the drink, I let go. What's the first thing that's going to happen? You're going to get a dopamine hit because the pain
mm,
stopped. You feel better. But is
mm.
that the reason why you took the drink? You did it to
Wow.
stop the pain. But
Yeah.
we will shame and guilt these people and tell them, you're just trying to get high.
Mm,
But it's
yeah.
not that. The root cause is the pain.
Yeah, it's so true. And I just love your work because it's exactly what I talk about a lot as well with my clients. It's what feeling are you trying to create or escape from, which ultimately is what you're saying in terms of the pain. You're trying to escape from something or create something. It's not actually the drink that you want, it's the feeling behind it. And to your point, when it comes to the emotional concussions, I love the fact that you said it's impossible to sabotage because so many people say, I'm self-sabotaging, I'm self-sabotaging. And you're right, it's not them, it's survival, it's what you've been programmed to do.
The mind's always trying to protect you. So
Mm,
it goes based on what it knows.
mm,
So if you have been drinking and that's been the solution to your pain,
mm,
so I give an explanation this way. If you walk 2 miles every day to get food, and on that 2 mile trip, you had to navigate through snipers and landmines, but every day you got there and got back and fed and you fed your family. And then somebody goes, well, why are you doing that? There's a grocery store 100 yards down that road. It's really well lit and it's bright and there's police everywhere. It's very safe. Your mind doesn't know that's true. It will continue to walk the 2 miles because it knows that. So I said, so the only way to change that is to create research for the brain that there's a better way. So what you have to do is you have to start walking down that other road a little bit every day until your mind overrides the other code and says, okay, this is the best way. It's better than the 2 miles. But your
mm.
mind won't make that shift until you prove to it. So I always say, think of repetition as research for the brain.
Yeah, really good. Repetitions research for the brain. It's so interesting because a lot of these codes that you talk about codes that have been programmed up to the age of 7 years old. And so we might not even be aware of a lot of these codes. And so with the work that you do, how would someone get through to those codes and change those codes, as it were? And obviously repetition is amazing because you can go and do that. But I think what you're saying is you also need to address the root cause as well.
There's the root cause. And that's where I talk about
Mm,
the emotional concussions. I'll give you an example. I had a lady, very successful entrepreneur, making pretty good money. So by all standards would be considered successful, but she said, I procrastinate all the time. And so
mm,
she says, I don't know why, I just procrastinate. So we looked back at, her childhood, and her mother was the principal at the school she went to. And she says, I remember at nighttime when I would do my homework, my mother would call from her office and say, bring me your work. And she had this red pen, and she would
mm,
underline all the mistakes I made and all the changes I had to make. So
mm,
what happened was is as she became an adult, she was avoiding, right, making mistakes. So she would push it off to the last minute and say, I operate better when I'm under pressure because that was the way she coped and figured out a way because she was trying to avoid what? The pain of her mother, right?
mm,
Highlighting her mistakes. That hurts, as especially as
mm,
a child. Now, the
mm,
mother's not trying to hurt her, the mother's trying to help her.
mm,
But the child right, doesn't have enough life experience, she sees the person that's caring for her and loving her as being critical. And so now that sticks with her and that becomes her code. Avoid
Yeah.
that at all costs. So if I can wait to the last minute to put my presentation together, I don't have time to correct it. I just have to go with what I got.
I'm sure I can resonate with that. I'm sure my listeners can resonate with that as well, because procrastination is just something that I find I do a lot, and I'm sure other people do. And you're right, it is probably because of something where you were either criticized or corrected a lot, and so then that's what you see, isn't it? And so actually doing it last minute, I've always said, "Oh, I'm very good at doing things last minute." You've just hit a nerve there, Dr. Thomas.
I
I
hear
need
that
to
all
think
the time.
about that one.
I work better under pressure. I say
Yeah,
nobody
yeah,
does, right?
you're right.
What
Yeah.
they built up to sort of give them the ability to wait to the last minute. I'll
Mm,
get that done later, but it's generally used to protect themselves. That's an emotional concussion. But we had to find out where it got created because if you look at that, she'd probably say, "Oh, I had a great mom." Right? She
mm,
was very successful, principal of a school, did really well, like great educator. So she's not connecting that up to the procrastination.
mm,
But once
mm,
you find that, it's not a trauma that anybody would call a trauma, but it's an emotional concussion. It hurt her that her mother criticized her. That's what the
mm,
child was hearing, but that's not what the mother was trying to do.
mm,
I've got another good example. Another guy, very successful guy, making about $2 million a year, trading options, derivative stocks, very successful. But he came to see me because he said, in the fourth quarter, he says, I sabotage myself. And I said, well, tell me, what do you do? He says, my anxiety is so bad in the fourth quarter, I don't want to go into the office. He says, so I make excuses. I tell my partners I'm burning out. I need a vacation. I'll go golfing. I'll do anything but go into the office because my anxiety gets so bad. And so again, we go back, good childhood, right? He says, oh, my dad's my hero. He's my mentor, very, very successful guy. He says, he's the most resilient man I've ever met. And I said, so explain to me the resiliency where you see that. And he says, well, he went bankrupt 4 times. And he says, and every time recovered. And so I said, tell me about that. And he says, well, I remember we used to fly in private jets. He says, and then in the middle of the night, being evicted, we'd have to pack up the car and leave. He says, and then we'd
mm.
be back in private jets and then getting evicted 4 times as a child. What was his mind trying to do?
Keep
Protect them
control.
in the fourth quarter from losing everything.
Mm,
And that's where
mm,
the anxiety, and this is what we talked about at the event that you saw me at.
mm.
Anxiety is a message.
Yeah.
Anxiety is your mind trying to protect you from something. It's sending you a message. If you don't look at what the message is, you'll never solve the anxiety.
Mm,
So what I explained there is think of anxiety as the email that keeps coming in, but you delete it. And the next day they send it again. The next day they send it. So it's your bank telling you that they've noticed suspicious activity on your account. They want you to go in and check it and let them know that you acknowledge all these charges.
mm,
So, but if you ignore it, it's going to keep coming. But as
mm.
soon as you realize, oh, I've checked my account, it's fine. There's no suspicious activity. The email stopped, the anxiety goes.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think anxiety is something that a lot of people use alcohol for as well, to release that feeling. And what a lot of people aren't aware of is that alcohol actually exacerbates the anxiety and stress and depression. But if for people that are anxious who may have stopped drinking, because I have listeners on every spectrum in terms of the alcohol-free journey. So if they've stopped drinking and they're still getting that anxiety, potentially it is some sort of trauma response as well, you would suggest.
Yeah. So you're right, absolutely right. The alcohol was trying to stop the pain, right? Which
Mm,
was coming from something. And so what's
mm,
really interesting too, Dupé, is I grew up in this idyllic childhood. I think I explained a little bit of that at the conference. I
mm,
never had any trauma. Yeah, I got
mm,
bumped here and there, but nothing like what would be a trauma. But
mm,
I had this idyllic childhood where I always felt safe. My parents never yelled, never argued, never raised their voice, and never
mm,
hit us. So that
Mm,
safety that I had growing up was a key, right? I've never had a drink in my life, never touched a drug in
mm,
my life, ever once,
mm,
but I never had their pain.
mm,
So, but we judge people, right? Our society wants to judge people and say, you're broken, you're defeated, there's something wrong with you, you don't have willpower. Why are you doing this? But it's not because of that. It's
mm,
because they found a way to temporarily stop their pain. And when do they want the pain to stop? Now, because the
mm,
subconscious operates in the present. It actually
mm,
solves the problem. But it's not about their character, morals, ethics, or willpower. It's about pain.
mm,
And you can
mm,
reset it. So I love what you're doing for people because when people hear that message, it's so
mm,
different than what they've been told. And
mm.
they're always being told that there's something wrong with them. They need to white knuckle this for the rest of their life. And I go, that's nonsense. There's
It
no way.
is.
It's like saying, I got COVID. Well, that's it. You're going to have symptoms of COVID for the rest of your life. You may not know it, but it's there. Right? No.
No, it's so true. And thank you for that. I love sharing this message because I think so many people see if they're drinking and they feel like they're drinking too much, and there's no too much or too little, it's all relative. If you feel that by taking alcohol out, you can improve your life mentally, spiritually, emotionally, or physically, whatever it is, then just do it. It doesn't really matter. It's a spectrum. It doesn't matter how much you're drinking. But people tend to think if I'm not that bad, or they're going to be labeled with the word alcoholic or something, which is what then stops them from making a choice and doing something different and reprogramming that subconscious mind. But ultimately, what you're saying, and it's science based as well, is it's just the reprogramming. It's nothing to do with you as a person. You are not a label. You don't need to label yourself. You can just reprogram. And I think the example you gave of walking down the street and not actually being able to do it and just carrying on with your habit of going through the landmines is so powerful because really that's all it is. It's finding different tools that you can use to change the way you behave, and that's then reiterating it and doing it over and over again. So one of the things I suggest is that you create an alcohol-free toolkit. So instead of reaching for a glass of wine or whatever your tipple is, you
Yep.
do something on that alcohol-free toolkit. You pause and then you maybe go for a walk. So you're putting something in instead of instead of having to have that drink. You're actually thinking, right, instead of having that drink, I'm feeling like this, so I'm going to do this because that's what I've decided. When I feel like this is where I go with my alcohol-free toolkit. But what you do in terms of tip is even more amazing because you can release all of that to the point where it's not even an issue in a few hours. Is that correct?
As little as 4 hours. So
Yes,
get to
exactly.
the root of the problem, clear that, and then work on the code. So it's 30 days of audios, right? To then start getting the mind to reset those codes. But it's
Mm,
easy to start resetting codes when you don't have the pain of the trauma pulling it
mm,
back. So
yeah,
that's what we
yeah.
have to do. And that's what AA and NA miss is
Mm,
they try to recode you. So
mm,
they're saying you can't touch alcohol, you can't be around alcohol, you're going to have to
mm,
avoid it for the rest of your life, right? And you're going to have to fight this. And I'm
mm,
just saying, well, that's true because you never fixed the problem. So if
mm,
you came
mm,
into the ER with a broken leg and we gave you a needle of morphine and said, how do you feel? And you go, actually, it doesn't hurt anymore. Oh, good, go home.
mm,
Then you
mm,
go home, the morphine wears off, you come back in, you need more morphine. But the key is to reset the leg and let it heal.
mm,
So you don't need the morphine. What you need is to reset.
mm,
And that's what our program does. It's a reboot. Go to
mm,
the pain first and then reset it. But it's
yeah.
certainly not about, and I use this, example. If I walked out of my house every day and I took a leaf off of the tree at the front of the house and I ate it, eventually I could not pass that tree without eating a leaf. What does
Mm,
that say about my character, my morals, my willpower? Nothing.
mm,
It's
yeah,
coding,
yeah.
right? And your brain is a computer. So
Mm,
if I type into my computer, if you ever had your computer tell you, don't type that, that's not good, right? It's literal. It just takes the programming.
mm,
And
yeah.
then you take a child between the ages of 0 and 7, who have no ability to make choices of what they're coding themselves, right? That's why. So I wrote my latest book is called Don't Mess with My DNA,
Mm.
because I'm talking about how the way we raise our children will affect the way their DNA is read and transcribed. And that will change the rest of the course of their life.
Mm.
So you need to be aware of it. Even with the best of intentions, we can change the coding.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I got into this work about 4.5 years ago properly. I'd been coaching and mentoring as part of my role for many, many years, but I started really studying and qualifying as a transformational coach, etc., 4 and a bit years ago. And our daughter at the time was 6 and she was about to turn 7. I was like, oh my goodness, we've damaged her already. You
Right.
learn all of this and you just think, oh my gosh, right. And it isn't that at all. As you say, we can only do what we know what we know at the time, and we can only do that. And so it's not about stressing people out or helping people, making people think, oh my goodness, what am I doing to my child? But it's about being aware of it, isn't it? And I think your book helps with that, just to get that understanding.
That's the whole point, is because we don't get a manual with the child, right? You buy a car, you get a manual. You don't get it with your child. But the idea is to just make them aware of the words you choose, right, have an impact. So be
Mm,
careful with the way you say it. But what I
mm,
also put in the book is we're going to make mistakes, right? And it's all correctable. It's all
mm,
fixable. You haven't damaged your child unless you
mm,
just continue with that kind of behavior. So if you want to fix it, there's absolutely the brain is so malleable, right? The neuroplasticity, and we're just publishing a study right now of people who had extreme trauma, did not respond to any kind of other treatments. They had anxiety, post-traumatic stress, depression, and panic attacks. And so we took them through our program, but we brain mapped them before we did our program and then brain mapped them 30 to 90 days afterwards. And the thing that we were looking for was what's the change in neuroplasticity? How much can the gene that regulates neuroplasticity upregulate? And the
mm,
average amongst the group, the youngest was 15, the oldest was 63. So a big diverse age group, diversity in
mm.
terms of the things they were dealing with. And we got a 46% increase in neuroplasticity
Wow. In
because
30 to 90 days. Wow.
is the gene that regulates that in the DNA. As long as you're being chased by a lion, it's not going to go and try to grow and learn. It's
Mm,
going to limit it. And that's neuroplasticity. Once it feels
mm,
safe, then it allows the system to go back into, okay, what else can we work on? How can we grow? What can we learn? And that's why you see so many children coming from homes that have all kinds of trauma, right? They struggle in school
mm,
because the gene that regulates that ability of the brain to adapt and grow is affected.
mm.
But the good news is it's all fixable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And that's some of the work that I do in terms of nervous system regulation, breath work, EFT, just to calm the nervous system down. But as you say, if there is that deep trauma there or any trauma there that's stopping you from moving forward, those things are great, but you do still need some sort of intervention as well to allow you to really benefit from that.
Yeah, and that's what we'd love to work with you and what you're doing and provide
Mhm.
you with access so that you can add this in so
Yeah.
that you can imagine what happens when you get that out of the way. You're already doing amazing work. Imagine what happens
Mm.
when you take the leash off that they're struggling with and then
Yeah.
their ability to grow, right? So, like I said, those people who were not responding to traditional treatment, right,
Mm.
all of a sudden have a 46% change in their
Amazing.
neuroplasticity. So then
Mm.
you start working with them, what's going to happen? They're going to absorb
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I had a
Absolutely.
pastor say to me one time, he says, "This is making so much sense to me now." He says, "I would pastor the people coming to church and they would sit there and go, 'Yes, pastor, yes, I'm going to do that. And absolutely, that's what I'm going to do from now on.'" And then they go right back to their old behavior. And he
Mm.
goes, "I didn't
Mm.
realize it was the trauma that kept bringing it back. I thought
Mm.
it was a conscious thing. They're telling me they're going to do it, but it's subconscious."
Absolutely. And it is working with the subconscious mind completely. And I think it would be great to hear a little bit about the program itself and the steps, because you mentioned obviously it's a 4 hours, but then a 30-day piece that happens after that.
Yeah. So in the 4 hours, the key, what I say is we need to get your mind into optimal condition to start healing. So traditional therapy is difficult because in an hour, the brain is still in a stressed mode. The reason I use 4 hours is to get it into that very relaxed, optimal condition. So the first 2 hours is all science and education. All I'm talking to them about, here's how your brain works. There's nothing wrong with your mind. You're experiencing these symptoms. Here's why these symptoms come in. I give them all the science behind it and what I learned in the research. And then in the third hour, we're going to say, let's take a look at 3 different events in your lifetime that have been either traumatic or disturbing or an emotional concussion. We're going to then, I said, when we look at one of them, and again moving the mind into optimal condition, I do a couple of different techniques to get your mind into that alpha brainwave state where it'll start resetting. And
Mm,
so I've had people with the aura rings. I had one gentleman when we started, he goes, my aura ring tells me I'm stressed all the time. And
mm,
he says, but I don't feel like I'm stressed. And he was a very high functioning guy, very successful guy. And he goes, so either the aura ring is wrong or I don't know what stress is. And so 2 hours in, right, we have this quick little bathroom break. He comes back and he goes, what are you doing? He goes, my aura rings tell me I'm in restore state now. How could I be
wow.
in restore state? We haven't done any trauma work yet. And I said, I know, but now I've got your mind ready to start the trauma work. And I said, and I'm looking for 2 to 3 events that fit that traumatic or disturbing or emotional concussion. And I said, if we made that event into a movie, I'm looking for the trailer. I don't need all kinds of details. We're not going to sit there and talk about it. I'm going to have you either visually or communicate it to me, tell me or just see it, what you went through as I take you through the technique. And in a minute or 2 minutes, it resets. The most dramatic one was a U.S. Army sniper, and he had to shoot and kill a 12-year-old. And so for 8 years, he was constantly being medicated. He said, I can't talk about this anymore. I said, well, that's good. I don't need you to talk about it. He goes, well, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to fix it. He goes, if I don't talk about it, how are we going to fix it? Because this is what he's been trained in, right? And I said, I just need your mind to start pulling up the information. And when your brain is going through that traumatic data, I'm going to have your mind reset it for you from high def into low def. And so after we finished, he said, he didn't talk to me at all, didn't tell me anything about it. And he says, let me share with you now. And he starts giving me a complete description and he's not shaking and crying. And he goes, how did you do that? And I said, I didn't do anything. Your mind reset it at a high def into low def. For 8 years, your mind has been trying to get you not to pull the trigger. It's seeing that trauma in real time and it's calling for an action. So the thing that I say to people is if you have an emotion, a feeling, or a sensation, your mind is calling for an action. What's the purpose of fear? Escape. What's the purpose of anger? Attack. So if you think about an event that happened to you 10 years ago and your heart's pounding in your chest, that's the glitch. Your mind is looking at that data in real time and thinks something's happening now. And so then it's going to activate your nervous system, which is what you're showing them on how to control, right? So now you take it one step further and you say, let's get rid of the event that keeps activating your nervous system. I never liked the word trigger. I use activate. Why is your nervous system activating? Right? It's because something activated it. And it's probably, now it makes sense if there's a threat now to activate. But if you're thinking about something that happened 10 years ago and it activates, that's the glitch that I'm talking about. And we can reset that.
It's
We'll work
amazing.
on 3 of those, reset those, and then the last hour we focus on performance. Now that we've got your mind reset, it'll continue to run that data. Now let's focus on your highlights and goals and targets and get your mind moving towards that performance.
And then the 30 days afterwards is a daily tip or
Daily,
daily
yeah, but
activity.
it's basically the walking out behavior audios are about 8 minutes long, and then there's 5 questions with each one. I have some walking out addiction. They're a little longer. They're 20 to 25 minutes a day, but we're
Mm,
basically retraining the brain, creating new neural pathways to drop the old codes and patterns.
yeah.
It's very simple to do.
Yeah, amazing. And a lot of people talk about changing habits and being able to do it in 21 days, or depending on who you ask, it can vary, the length can vary. But ultimately, within those 30 days, people are then completely healed, as it were, and can move on.
Yeah. So the idea is you just retrain the brain.
Mm,
The
mm,
brain is very capable of changing. It's
mm,
designed to change, but it won't change if you're in a threat
yeah.
because the change may not be safe.
Mm,
So that metaphor I use about walking 2 miles every day,
mm,
even though that's dangerous, your mind says, I know I can do it. I
mm,
can survive it. I know how to do
mm,
that. That new way you're telling me is more dangerous because I don't know.
mm,
Because the number one fear for the human mind is uncertainty. So
mm,
the very safe route that I told you about that would guarantee your safety, right, is
mm,
still uncertain. The mind won't make a change to an uncertain way if it has a certain way, even if it's not safe.
mm. And that's why I love the phrase everything you want is on the other side of fear, because ultimately it's change, but we're afraid of change because, as you say, that's the way the brain works. So if you can get through that, then actually you get over that fear and you can retrain the subconscious mind. It's amazing what you can then go on to achieve.
Understanding the science behind it. Why does
Mm,
the mind do that? You say, well, why would the mind put me on this really bad path? It's sabotaging me.
mm,
Well, no, you walk the 2 miles every day and you got food. It's not sabotaging you, it's protecting you. It says, we know that route. We've gotten really
yeah,
good at navigating it, right? Don't make a change because the change could be more dangerous. We have
mm,
no idea how dangerous that other route was, no matter how much somebody consciously tried to. My conscious mind could say, well, that makes total sense. Yeah, I'm
mm,
going to do that. The subconscious will go, hold on. No, we don't know that. And unless I know with more data, and that's the
mm,
research, you give me enough
mm,
data, I'll make a change, but I'm not making quick changes. Because when
mm,
you think about it, quick changes may not be safe. So the mind has learned to protect you by saying every time if we try to make a quick change, we don't know, that creates more uncertainty, which creates more stress.
mm, mm. This is amazing. So let's talk about your books. I'd love it if you could. We've obviously touched on the emotional concussions and the other one, but maybe give a flavor as to what people could expect if they wanted to get your books.
Yeah, the first one was the one I wrote really about how I developed the program. And I called it You Must Be Out of Your Mind, right? And the idea is to get you out of the way your mind is working. And just what we talked about, the mind will not make fast changes, so you have to train it. So I talk about how I developed the program. I talked about how the pharmaceutical industry took over the medical business in the 60s. And so now everything is a pill. Everything is, and you can see how people can use alcohol as well as another way to solve their problems. But our brains are so brilliant. So here's a great example. This is something I talk about. I work with veterans. So a lot of veterans are using marijuana. They're prescribing them THC, right? The reason they prescribe them that is to try to help them calm down, right? Chill out. So
Mm,
what I explain to them is if you look at the chemical structure of THC, that almost has the exact chemical makeup of another molecule in your brain called anandamide. Anandamide is basically the endocannabinoid that releases serotonin.
mm,
So that endocannabinoid is released when you need to de-stress. And so anandamide will attach to the receptors in the brain and then send serotonin to chill you out and calm you down. So THC looks almost identical in chemical makeup to that. So when the THC hits the brain treats it the same way and produces anandamide.
mm,
So why are all these veterans using THC? The reason is that when they're stressed with post-traumatic stress, the brain won't produce anandamide. So the only way they're getting relief is to use the THC, when really what they only need is the anandamide. But post-traumatic stress keeps the brain in that constant fight or flight. If it's in fight or flight, it's not going to produce a chilling effect because that could kill you. You're being chased by a lion. We don't need to chill out. We need to keep running. So it doesn't want to chill you out as long as and trauma keeps running. It's the lion chasing you. So naturally, it doesn't produce the endocannabinoid, right, to chill you out, even though you're not in stress. Your mind doesn't know that because the trauma keeps turning the system on. So it won't naturally produce the anandamide until you escape. So these poor guys are being medicated because they can't naturally produce it. All they really need to do is get the post-traumatic stress out of the way, and then the system will do it naturally.
Yeah. And I think so many people live in that fight or flight mood, and
Yeah.
that's why they then use other things, excessive eating, drugs, whatever, to try and just get into that, oh, I can relax now, when really it isn't that at all, is it?
No, and we're shaming them. What's
Yeah.
wrong with you? Why are you doing this to your family? Why are you going out and getting drunk and going out to
Mm,
bars all the time? Because they can't figure out another way to stop it.
mm,
And so
mm,
they need a resource to stop it. So what you're doing and educating them about it's really a code, it's a habit, right,
mm.
is amazing because they felt all of this shame and guilt. Well, it's because of my character, my morals, my
Yeah.
ethics. I don't have willpower. That's nonsense. It comes back and even choice. One of the things that I talk about, and this is really interesting, is what I say to somebody about choice. So if I said to you, Dupe, the blouse that you're wearing, right? Did you choose to wear that today? What would you
Yes.
tell me how
Yes.
you chose it? Tell me what the process was.
I looked at my wardrobe. I'm wearing some blue jeans, and so I was thinking, oh, what can go with it? A white crisp linen shirt. Knowing I was talking to you, so I thought I'd put this shirt on.
So you saw the shirt, right? The thought came
Yeah,
in, you acted on the
yeah,
thought. This would look good with that.
yeah,
Why didn't you choose the pink polka dot shirt?
yeah. I haven't got a pink polka dot shirt, but
But I wanted you to pick the pink polka dot shirt. Why didn't you pick it? Well, I don't have it. How could I choose it?
yeah,
So when you have people who are stuck in addiction, we say,
yeah.
why are you choosing that? Is because that's all they have available.
Something. Oh, yeah, yeah. So
So they
true.
put it in their closet, right? And that drink is the thing that's sitting in the closet. It's the white linen shirt, right?
Mm,
They
mm.
don't have another alternative. What you're doing is give them another thing to put in the closet that they can eventually, and just got to keep going back and choosing that, right? Until eventually it becomes easy to make the choice because it's available. But don't shame them because they didn't pick it because they didn't have it.
Yeah, yeah. And then this also goes down to parenting as well, because I don't want anyone listening to think, oh my goodness, I've ruined my children because they're teenagers now. But again, you only can act on what you know at the time. And so grab Dr. Don's book and you can learn a bit and then you can go forward with that knowledge. So if people want to do your course as well, your program, how best for them to do it? I've got listeners from all over the world, so I know you do have a digital version as well as an in-person version.
Yeah, so we have obviously the in-person. If you come to Orlando, I do it one-on-one with you, but I can do it over Zoom as well, same
Mhm.
4 hours, or you can do the digital version where you do the whole 4 hours in your own home, and it takes you
Mm,
right through the whole program and
mm,
get great results with it.
mm.
Because again, it's just education science. I give you all the techniques to use, and you
Yeah.
do it, and very, very effective.
So there's no difference if someone does it with you in person, online, or via the digital mode.
I
Apart
always
from
say
it's obviously you, it's you get to speak to Dr. Don, so that's a great thing.
it's the book and the movie. I'm the book,
Yeah,
the movie. If you went to see the
yeah,
movie, you go, oh, that movie was really good. But if somebody read the book, they'll go, oh, but they did put all this in and that in. And one-on-one with me, I can put in a lot more detail. So
yeah, of
depending on
course.
your situation, what we always do though is somebody says they did the online, but they still feel like they need maybe the one-on-one. We don't
Mm,
add on that cost again, we take off that cost, right? So,
Okay, great.
so that they get that benefit.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure, and you're just full of so much wisdom. Is there anything else that you want to share that we might not have covered?
The thing that I say to everybody when I first start off, there's nothing wrong with you and there's nothing wrong with your mind.
Mm,
And Dupé, I've had people cry when I say that. I had one
mm,
lady who was alcohol, she was alcohol addiction, and she literally started to sob. She goes, "That's not how I've been treated." She
mm,
said she refused to go back to another rehab. Her brother brought her in and saying that she refuses, she won't go back to a rehab. And what she said I thought was really powerful. She says, "I refuse to unpack my suitcase of shame again." I thought, wow, that's really powerful.
wow. Yeah, yeah. And
So
it is something that people live with, isn't it? People think there is something wrong with them, but ultimately everyone is whole and all the answers are inside you and there's nothing wrong with you. So I love that you've said that.
yeah. And again, like I said, I've never had a drink in my life, never touched a drug in my life, but I never had their pain. So if I'd have had
Mm,
their pain, I would have found that probably that either that resource or a similar resource. It's just about the way
absolutely.
the brain works. Pain is a very, very powerful motivator.
Yeah, so true, so true. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. And I know you've never drunk, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway, because it would just be useful, helpful to get your point of view. But what would you say thriving alcohol-free means to you?
So thriving, what was that? Thriving.
Thriving alcohol-free. Yeah.
Oh, I have lived my whole life like that, and
Yeah.
it's amazing, right? So I remember when I was a teenager, it was all that pressure. You need to have a drink. One guy said to me one time, he says, "Just have a drink. It'll help you relax." And I said, "If I'm any more relaxed, I'm going to be a pool of water on the floor." You really don't need it. I mean, I've lived my life without it, and it doesn't mean that I don't have things come at me and I can get stressed out here and there. But as a child, my system learned to reset. So if I
Mm,
got bumped by a teacher, a coach, a friend, I came back into my home, and my home was so safe that went back into safety. My nervous system reset. It's similar to
mm,
what an animal does. When an animal gets attacked, what do they do afterwards? They shake it off, right? And so they literally
yeah.
shake and they're resetting their nervous system. So
Mm,
it's possible to live your life like that and
mm.
thrive alcohol free.
Perfect. So how can people get in touch with you, Don?
Go to our website, which is the Inspired Performance Institute or drwoodphd.com, and they can
Mhm.
find out all about our program. And we'd
Brilliant.
love to be doing more with you and seeing how we can work together to help more people.
Yeah, I'd love that. We will be in touch about that, definitely. Thank you so, so much. Well, I think that's been a real treat for the listener, and I'm sure they have got a lot out of that. And I really want to reiterate what you said about the fact that it is a program, it's a glitch, it just needs to be rebooted, and it's nothing to do with you, and you are not self-sabotaging, because I think that's a really powerful message. So
This is
thank you.
impossible to self-sabotage.
It is impossible to self-sabotage, which again is just mind-blowing. So for whoever's listening, I hope that's helped you. And Dr. Don, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Dr. Don. That was such an amazing conversation, and I do hope it's helped you and given you a different perspective as well. And I loved what he said about the fact it's impossible to self-sabotage. So all of you who are out there who've been saying I'm self-sabotaging, you can't actually self-sabotage. And I thought that was a really powerful statement. I loved what he talked about when he described the little t traumas and as emotional concussions, and just the examples he gave as well in terms of how, as children, we would have interpreted things quite differently. And that's where we get the I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, they don't care from. But actually, it's all part of our subconscious mind, which we run on daily. And 95% of the things we do is based on our subconscious mind. So I do hope you found that really, really helpful. And I thought it was a fascinating conversation. So I want to remind you that if you are thinking about taking a break from alcohol, then feel free to join the 21-day challenge. First coaching session starts this evening, and then the retreat, the Finding Freedom retreat. I would love to see you there. I really believe it's going to be a life-changing experience. I spent a month in Bali last year and it did change my life. It's a magical place and I would really love for you to experience it. 5 spots left. So talk to me if you have any questions. Feel free to book a call, DM me, and we can make sure that this is aligned for you. But if you are certain that this is something you'd want to do and you want to join me in Bali and learn all the tools and just release anything that you think might have been holding you back and experience growth, learning, and the power that is inside you, then feel free to go to the website thrivealcoholfree.com/finding freedom retreat, and I'd love to see you there. Well, have the most wonderful week, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you get alerted every time I drop a new episode. I'd love it if you could rate, review, and share this episode. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at Thrive Alcohol Free and follow me for daily tips. If you would like to work with me, I offer one-to-one coaching sessions and have my group coaching program. If you're not yet ready for coaching, I also have a self-paced online course, which is a companion to my book, A Cocktail of Clarity. All the links are in the show notes. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful week. Take care.